Good evening, everyone. Thank you all very much for inviting me here. Before we get started, I would like to enter into an agreement with all of you that as I give my comments and remarks, if I say something funny, I want you to laugh. Practice. Everybody laugh. Ha, 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 ha. Okay. If I say something really important and you agree with me, I want a thumbs up. If you don't agree with me, give me a thumbs down, then you leave. Because you must agree with me. That's the rule. If I say something really stupid, don't tell me. I don't want to know about it because I think I'm really smart. But most importantly, I want you to engage with me today because we should have a conversation and I shouldn't just talk at you. I would like to talk with you. So when we're done with the remarks I'm going to make, then we'll do some questions and answers. And please be bold because this is the future for all of us. And I want to share with you everything I know. In my career at McDonald's and other businesses I've been involved in, I don't think I ever had an original idea. Everything I know, I learned from somebody else. And this is an opportunity for all of us to learn from each other. And even though I'm 70 years old, I don't intend to quit working for at least another 30 years. I'm actually shooting for 38 more years. So please engage with me. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in a very small community in the United States that had 999 people for 5 decades. Never got over 1,000. I graduated 7th in my high school graduating class, which sounds really good, except that there was only 17 kids in the class, and I was in the bottom half. I think that's half. What's half of 17? 8.5? 7.5? Whatever it is. See, the school was really small, and I didn't do that much math when I was in school. I met the first African American in college. I'd never met one before then. And when I went to school at Ohio State University, there were 70,000 kids on campus, and I met people from all over the world. And it was a very frightening matter for me because I was only 17 years old. I didn't really want to go to college. All I wanted to do was join the Air Force and fly aircraft, and I found out I couldn't do that because they said I was too fat. I didn't agree with them, but that's the way it is. So I majored in physical sciences. I was going to teach physical science in high school, and my dad told me that would be a good idea because it's steady work, and you get paid regularly, and you don't have to work all that hard because school in the United States is only 9 months out of the year, and the other 3 months you could get a part-time job and earn more money. He said it was good, steady work. Unfortunately, I really didn't like university at all. I didn't like studying things that I didn't care about. I had to take fine arts, and I had to draw and paint and sculpt. I don't like that stuff. I like to look at beauty. I can't create it because I'm not a kind of person that has those kind of skill sets. I can't play a piano. I can't sing. I can't keep time. I can't paint. I can't write, and I can't draw. But I really love science, so I took 60 hours of geology with no use for it. It was fun. So in my senior year in February, I dropped out of college. I didn't graduate. And I needed a job making $85 a week U.S., so I went to a business that was opening up across the street from my college office. It said, "Help Wanted." And I knew I was good help. I work really hard, and I work long. And I told the guy I needed $85 a week, and he said, well, we only pay 85 cents an hour, but you can work 100 hours. I said, okay, I can do that because I've been working like that all my life. I started working when I was 9 years old in the grocery store, stocking shelves. I also worked cleaning some different businesses to earn money. And I learned a lot at that very young age. I learned to work hard. I also learned that I didn't like a lot of the stuff I had to do. But I went to work for McDonald's, and I was very, very lucky. And I make no mistake about this. I started working for McDonald's in 1966 when it was just beginning to grow as a company. And when I started there, I think we had something like 600 restaurants, give or take a few. Today, there's over 36,000. And when I left McDonald's, there was about 28,000 restaurants around the world, in virtually every country that you could build a McDonald's in. While I was at McDonald's, I was fortunate that I encountered some really terrific people who were my mentors, people who took me under the wing and said, young man, this is the kind of things you need to do. And while I thought I was getting a job, I ended up getting a career. Everyone needs mentors. And one of the things I've learned since I've been here in Kuwait is that a lot of young people have said to me since I've been here for the last 3 days that it's very difficult to create a career or get the kind of job you really want unless you know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody, or you have direct contact, because access is difficult. Quote, it's very political. Well, that's true everywhere you go in the world, and McDonald's was no different. It was very political. It was easy to get into, and it was hard to advance. So I worked really hard, and I advanced, and I ended up being the president and CEO of the North American division when I was 36 years old. I was the senior executive vice president, chief operations officer globally. So I not only had North American responsibilities, but I had to travel around the world helping new countries open and for new McDonald's to be put into place in countries and grown and to help them become more and more successful. McDonald's is a franchising organization. Only about 10% to 15% of the restaurants are company-owned across the world, because entrepreneurs are really important for growth in businesses. I want to talk about just one thing really quickly before I get into the depth of what I want to talk about, and that is there's a big difference between entrepreneurs and gamblers. Ray Kroc, who founded McDonald's, was a gambler. He took a lot of risk without a lot of facts, and he got lucky with McDonald's. He started McDonald's when he was 55 years old. Up to that point, he had an enormous number of failures. He was a consummate salesman, and he sold paper goods to the restaurant industry, and he sold real estate in Florida back during the Depression, and most of it was swampland. He sold about everything you could imagine, and he was selling milkshake machines when he found the McDonald's brothers in Southern California who were buying 10 of his machines. And no other customer in the United States was doing that. So he went to California to visit them to see what they were doing. And the McDonald's brothers had placed an order for 10 machines for their first store. And then the next couple of stores, they placed 10 more machines for those restaurants. And so the first time he went to California, he went out by train from Chicago. And the second time he went out, which was a year later in 1954, he went out there, he drove all the way out and came back. When he went out the second time, he talked to the McDonald's brothers about franchising. And for the longest time, they really resented his success because he was a gambler. He was a risk taker. They were entrepreneurs. They wanted to mitigate risk. They wanted to reduce risk, and they wanted to be profitable. So they were very conservative. And that is really a big difference in how some people approach business. Franchisees largely are entrepreneurs. They like the umbrella of a system that makes money consistently so that they guard against losses. There's a big important component to that for all the young people in this room. A couple things to think about. McDonald's did not hire women until 1970 to work in the restaurants. And Ray Kroc was adamant that women should not work in restaurants because they were a distraction to the men. Later on, he discovered that was not the smartest thing he could do. something to think about in the cultures of companies and how they behave early on in their beginning. I've been in Kuwait now for 3 days, and I have really, really been blown away with what a great country this is. It is small, but it is vibrant and it is alive. The people I've met have been wonderful. I had an opportunity to visit a very large shopping center, a shopping mall, and I was amazed at the number of U.S. restaurants in that mall. And I was amazed to see the quality of the brands within that mall. It was really spectacular, probably one of the best malls I've ever been in my life. The food I experienced was really on both ends. We went into a part of the mall that seemed like an old bazaar where we sat and had teas and coffees and pastries. I love that stuff, by the way. Those teas and those pastries were really good. I really enjoyed that very much. I've eaten hummus. Yeah, I've eaten hummus in the United States, but trust me when I tell you, hummus in the United States is not hummus. Hummus here is hummus. I don't know what that stuff is in the United States, but I will no longer call it hummus, by the way. Oh, by the way, the pita bread, is that how you say the pita bread? That is different here, too, than it is in the United States. So thank you very much for giving us hummus and pita. I really enjoyed that very much. I also really enjoyed the people. Boy, you are fortunate to have the kind of pleasant personalities and smiles in such an engaged group of young people. I don't think anybody I've been with is over 30. Boy, what a great treasure and what a great asset all of you are to your country. I want to talk to you about, the title of this thing is 8 Common Characteristics of Leadership. And I want to say that I can talk about these individually, and the reality of it is that every one of these most common forms of leadership are found in all of us in one form or another. One of the significant forms of leadership that you're going to encounter is one, leadership by personality or of personality. Are you familiar with Oprah Winfrey in the United States? Yes, no? Okay, let me hear you. Yes or no? Yes, okay. Everybody knows Oprah. I'm not a big fan of hers, by the way, but she is what she is. Oprah Winfrey is a leader by personality. She has a certain charisma about her. She's a charismatic leader. People follow her. They like being in her presence because of how she conducts herself, how she is, the way she talks to people, the way she engages with people, and the way that she was raised, and her life experiences cause her to be a leader through charisma and personality. I don't have much of that. I'm not very personable. I get very loud when I talk to people, and I say what I mean, and I say it very quickly, and I say it very directly. I'm not a leader by personality or charisma. I'm a really nice guy, but I don't lead that way. And I'm going to get to my leadership style in just a minute. Another form of leadership that is very important, and one that I want to talk about a little bit longer than charismatic, and that's innovation, leaders of innovation. Sir Richard Branson is an example. Virgin Music, Virgin Airlines, the guy that wants to go into space. He is a man that leads people. He wants people around him that are smart. He wants risk takers. He wants people that analyze data. He wants to be on the leading edge, the cutting edge. He wants to be in front of everybody all the time, and no matter what field he's involved in. He went from music. He opened his first business when he was 16 years old, and he wants to go to space and sell trips on spaceships. He's a man that creates a vision for people and says, this is what we can do if we unleash the power of our minds. He's a man that talks about innovation. He is a pioneer. He's an explorer. He surrounds himself with scientists. He surrounds himself with people that are innovators like himself. So his leadership style is one of setting a blue ocean horizon of what could be, and then surrounding himself with people that will get him to that vision. And along the way, he makes a lot of mistakes and trips on a lot of issues, but he never loses sight of the vision. He's driven by the fact that he wants to innovate societally, scientifically, musically, in the arts. He is just an innovator, and he leads that way all the time. Another kind of leadership is command and control. And this is at one time one of the best leadership styles for people who have short-term objectives and they've got to get there fast. For you young people, you may not have studied this or know this, but General George Patton, the United States Army, was a command and control leader. He was a guy that took a group of soldiers in World War II and drove them across Europe in 3 days to save a group of men that were trapped in the woods in Northern Europe. His style was one of drive, demand performance, demand loyalty, demand commitment, demand. And he was a person who believed in a system that says, these are the goals and the objectives, you will achieve them, and if you don't, there will be rewards and there will be consequences. And he operated very directly and with a lot of force and a lot of power. That's one of the toughest kind of leaders that there is to follow. So command control is a very common form of leadership. A lot of coaches in sports are like that. Gymnastics, the Olympics. You see command and control in coaches across the globe. It's a very common thing when you're involved in athletics because their goals are all short-term. Win tomorrow. Win at the next game. So command and control is one of immediacy and one of really quick behavior. Another form of leadership is a laissez-faire style of leadership. Donna Karan, the fashion designer, leads that way. Has an idea of what her fashion should be, surrounds herself with people who are young and exciting, and they make fashion, and then she allows them to express themselves over time and gives them guidance and adjustment as she goes along. You see a lot of laissez-faire manager in the arts and museums and places like that. Laissez-faire managers that own businesses generally have a lot more trouble because it's hard for them to stay focused and drive performance in a very specific way. And you know as well as I do, the business is all about making a profit every day. And in the restaurant industry that I come from, it is not a profit of large numbers. It's a profit of small numbers. Of our revenue, 36% is labor cost. Occupancy costs can be as much as 30%. Other managerial opportunities within the P&L, you end up with somewhere around in the typical restaurant in the United States. The typical restaurant in the United States makes about 5% profit. And very often that's with a very big investment. That's not a very good return compared to most businesses. So when you look at the kind of leaderships you need, privately owned restaurants, individual restaurants, need almost a command and control style of leadership to make them successful. Another form of leadership is transformational leadership. Are you familiar with Ben & Jerry's ice cream in the United States? Yes? How many know Ben & Jerry's? Okay, Ben & Jerry took something as ordinary as a milk-based dessert and transformed it by creating flavors that nobody had ever thought of before. They transformed the industry by creating a desire for really out in front, almost innovative flavors. And a big part of their process of success and in transformation was that they focused very, very heavily on community outreach. They believed that if they were successful, they would be successful because the community, the larger community, the people, their customers, supported them. And they thought it was very important that they give back to those communities. And even to this day, even though they've sold their company, they preserved within their purchase contract the right to take a certain percentage of the sales of that company and devote it to community outreach. They were very much of the leadership style that says we're not going to lead by being in front. We want our community to be in front. We want to be transformational. We want you to think about our business differently than you've ever thought about a business before because we are so tied to the community. Another form of leadership is what's known as situational. People lead in the moment. They look around them, they see what they need to do, they read body language well, they read communities well, they see what the community needs, and they try to deliver it within their organization, their company, or their business. These are people that always surround themselves with talented generalists. They don't have a lot of very keen, very sharp specialists in any field. They like generalists to help them, and as they assess the situation, then they move forward and make decisions based on the moment. An example of that, in the United States, there was a female basketball coach. She coached college basketball. She was the winningest coach ever in the history of collegiate athletics in the United States. And she was very, very careful about watching the circumstances, looking at the environment she was in, and picking people that were very, very good at a lot of different things and moving her team forward. She was not a command and control person. She won more basketball championships than any other coach in any sport. Her name was Pat Summitt, by the way. A very, very talented woman. Another style of leadership is a servant style of leadership. How many of you are familiar with Southwest Airlines? Southwest Airlines, mostly the United States. I don't know if they do much international travel. But Southwest Airlines, for years and years and years, has been the only airline in the United States to make money. And Herb Keller, that started that airline, very much believed that he might have been in charge, but his people were more important than he was. And he often said, the business is the business of people. Business is the business of people. And so he had a very interesting way of developing that airline. He knew that he needed his employees to be more than just single-focused employees. So his pilots would handle luggage if needed. They would serve meals if needed if they were sitting on the ground and got stranded somewhere. The cabin attendants always interacted with the customers on the airplane in a very humorous, friendly way. It was almost like they were going to have a party in the plane to wherever they were going. And they joked, they laughed, they wore uniforms that were not traditional airline uniforms. And anybody that had a job to do did it. It didn't make any difference what their job title was. If they needed to sweep the floors, they swept the floors. If they needed to polish an airplane, they polished the airplane. They did whatever they had to do to be cost effective. Herb said the only way we're going to make money is if all of us pitch in and cooperate and work in a way. And I will be your servant. I will serve you. So he did long-term and short-term incentives that allowed his people to grow and develop as the airline grew and developed. They were based at Love Field in Texas, so their symbol was a heart. To show you how far he went, Herb Keller had a pilot who had a child that got really critically ill, and that pilot stayed at the Ronald McDonald House, which was founded by McDonald's. And to this day, that pilot went to Herb and said, I'd like to have Ronald McDonald House as one of our principal charities. And Herb said, great, I'm here to serve you. So all across the United States now, wherever Southwest Airlines has a hub. They go to the Ronald McDonald House and cook lunches and dinners every month to give back to the community where they do business. They made one of the largest grants ever to the Ronald McDonald House. They gave Ronald McDonald House $5 million over 5 years. It was $1 million commitment per year because they wanted to reach the community. Because Herb Keller was a servant style of leadership. He believed in a community of his people and making sure that they were happy and healthy and prosperous, and that was more important to him than anything. And by doing that, his people rewarded him by following that leadership and behaving in a way that made that a very, very profitable airline for a very long time. The eighth style of leadership is pace setter. The guy that founded Amazon, the great retail purchasing opportunity, Jeff Bezos, he was a pace setter. He's the kind of leader that surrounds himself with very, very strong technical people, people that understand data, people that understand systems. He wanted to use technology to create a business, and he wanted to make it easier for the consumer to enjoy the things they wanted to enjoy in life. So he created Amazon, and his leadership style was to always set the pace, always to be out front, always driving his people through example and being on the cutting edge of the future. That kind of leadership is really, really hard work because you have to be constantly thinking about the future. You constantly have to think about what's going on in the world and how you can make the life of the consumer easier by the work products you produce. And it also requires and demands that you have really, really, really sharp people working for you that are smart and engaged. And I gave you a real high-level view of the different styles of leadership in management. Personally, I'm about a third, and a third of three different forms of leadership, with a little touch of command and control every once in a while. When I think about myself in this context, I'm a little bit of an innovation person. I think when you're in the consumer business, like I've always been in the restaurant industry, you have to innovate. You have to give people things they don't know they want yet. Because restaurants thrive on new news. It can be new news of menu. It can be new news of nutrition. It can be new news of promotion. It's got to be new news. You've got to stay ahead of the consumer. Because consumers, people who eat in restaurants, don't go to restaurants for nutrition. They don't go there because they're hungry. I don't know anybody in the world that's hungry except some disadvantaged children from different places in the world and sometimes in our own backyard. But the largest people who use restaurants, they're not hungry when they go there. People go to restaurants for entertainment. People go to restaurants to socialize. They go to restaurants to see and discover new things. There's a restaurant chain in the United States called Buffalo Wild Wings. They sell chicken wings and 1,000 different kind of hot sauces. I don't know how many. And they have sports TVs with sports all over the inside the building. They're very popular. The food's just good enough to get you come back again. But what's really important about that place is the fact that it is very much a sports entertainment experience. So innovation is important to me because I need new news in the business I'm in. How do I get people excited about eating? We've been eating since we're born. We know how to eat. Today, folks, particularly in the United States, are foodies. They're sampling new food continually. They're trying to find new tastes and new spices. And frankly, the food largely in the United States, except in most high-end restaurants, has become very ordinary. And that's one of the reasons why the entire mid-tier of restaurants in the United States are having a lot of trouble making money. There hasn't been enough innovation in menu and service style. It's just now starting to come where the restaurant industry is using technology. I personally, my innovative style, my innovative piece says to me, if we don't put technology into restaurants in a profound way, we're going to fail ultimately. To this extent, if I have an iPhone, a smartphone of any sort, I want an app on that phone. As I'm driving down the street, I can hit my button for the kind of food I want at the restaurant I want it at. And when I get there, they know I'm coming. They have my table ready to go. My server's going to greet me. And I'm going to sit down and they're going to ask me about a beverage. They're going to say, Ed, would you like, which is what I always order, because people tend to order the same things in the same restaurant over and over again, to make that process easier. And I want a tablet on the table that I can get Wi-Fi on, I can play games on, I can place my order on, I can summon my server on, that I can order another beverage on, that I can order a dessert or an appetizer to make it easy. And oh, by the way, if I'm a young person, I got a bunch of young kids with me, they can turn it into a kids game of some sort where they can play video games. Technology has to be there. I talked to about 100 McDonald's people this morning, and you know, innovation has to happen. You have to have innovation in restaurants today. It's a far cry from selling a hamburger, a milkshake, and a French fry to the complex menu you have today. So from my point of view, innovation is really, really important in the hospitality industry to make that service experience even better. I also believe in transformational leadership, and there's a big chunk of me that falls into that category. And transformational for me is, how do I get connected to the community, and that ties into a servant. How do I get connected to the community, and how do I get my employees to be connected to a community? Because the reality of it is, corporations don't have souls, businesses don't have souls, but the people that work there do. And you need to nourish the spirit of the individual as much as you do the business. So when I think about myself, I think in terms of what is my leadership style, and who am I, and what am I, and when am I the way I need to be during the business process every day. And for all the young people in this room, as you think about yourself, you need to really discover and know yourself. Because until you know yourself, you're not going to be able to lead people anywhere. Because you're never going to get out of people more than you're willing to give of yourself to them. And believe me, your body language, your behavior will be very well read by your employees. And if they don't have trust and confidence in you, you cannot lead them anywhere. They may have a job with you, but they'll never have a career with you. And careers are vitally important in this day and age. We have a real problem in the United States today where people will leave this job to go to another job for 10% increase in salary or less. They move because of money and not because they're committed to an idea, not because they're committed to a corporation, not because they're committed to a product. They just move. And the problem you end up with then in that kind of circumstance, you have no loyalty. Your tribal knowledge, in other words, the hidden knowledge of an organization is lost. There's the written rules of organizations, and then there's the unwritten rules. The unwritten rules of organization are more powerful than the published rules. And as I spoke to the young people in this room and people like you the last 3 days, one of the things I discovered was the written rules are pretty well understood in most organizations. What's confusing to the young people in this room and around, from what I can gather in Kuwait, is the unwritten rules are not well known. And it takes a long time to move into the circles where you can grow and prosper and develop. Can't let it stand in your way, but it exists evidently. And you need to understand what the written and unwritten rules are going to be. So as you think about yourself and you think about your leadership style, you have to ask yourself the question, who and what am I? How am I going to give to my employees? And how am I going to motivate the people that are going to ultimately work for me? And what kind of career and what kind of job do I want to have? A couple things to think about. Some of you work for businesses now. Do you have strategic plans for your businesses? How many business owners or managers in the room have strategic plans for their business? Could you put your hand up if you do? It's hard for me to see right now. Sure. Most companies do have strategic plans. Of the people that are in here that are employees of organizations or companies, how many of you have personal strategic plans? Put your hand up so I can see. Okay, a few, not so many. I think it's vitally important as you consider yourself and how you're going to fit into a workplace or a business or starting a business, you have to have a strategic plan not only for that business, you have to have a strategic plan for yourself. You have to have a vision statement. You know, who and what am I and what do I want to be? You have to have a mission statement. You have to talk about in that statement of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Then you need to have a system of beliefs, behaviors, and values. Those are vitally important in a strategic plan. Now, very quickly, the reason why you need a strategic plan, particularly in business, when you get lost along the way, you've got to have a way to get back to where you should be. And I can tell you in McDonald's Corporation, we had a strategic plan, but we changed leadership in about 1997 or 8. And the new leader that took over the company said to me one day, the business model of cheap hamburgers is over. If we don't diversify our menu and move into other businesses, we're going to fail as a company. So McDonald's went on a buying binge and spent hundreds of millions of dollars buying a pizza company in Columbus, Ohio called Donato's Pizza. They bought Fazoli's Italian restaurant. They bought Boston Market. They bought Chipotle. They bought Pret Manger. And they bought a lot of other restaurants as well, because the leader thought that the business model for hamburgers had failed. He created a new business strategy for that company. 4 years later, when he started that journey, the stock was $96 a share, split down and settled in at about $42 a share. And by the time he left 4 years later, the stock was $12 a share. $90 to $24 in 4 years. He spent $400 million trying to create a global system of accounting. Now, you know and I know every country is different. How do you get a global system of accounting where every restaurant in every country is managed the same way from a financial standpoint? $400 million. Spent almost that much and more to make these acquisitions. It very nearly destroyed the company. The board of directors fired him and brought back the president and CEO of McDonald's International, Jim Cantalupo. And when Jim came back, the first thing he did was take out the strategic plan for McDonald's that was created by the founders of the company and said, where did we go wrong? Stay focused. Stick to your knitting. Do the business that you know best. I had lunch with a banker here in Kuwait, I think it was yesterday, and he's approaching his retirement. And he was talking about opening up a 5-star restaurant because he's always had a dream of running a 5-star restaurant. People who have been in the restaurant business 50 years have not made a 5-star restaurant. It is one of the hardest things in the world to do. It is difficult. Why would a banking guy think that he could retire at 58 years old and start a 5-star restaurant and be successful? How close to insanity is that? Now, he's a really nice man. I talked him out of it. I hope I did. I said, if you think you can run a 5-star restaurant, get a job managing one and see if you love it, see if you like it, see if you can do it. You know, as you think about businesses and how they function, you've got to be smart about what you're doing. Do what you know how to do best. Have a strategic plan that will bring you back when you get lost. That's on the business side. How about the personal side? If you're a banker and you're really good at banking, your strategic plan is going to say certain kinds of things. It's going to keep you from trying to open up a 5-star restaurant. I can tell you one of the great tragedies of restaurants in the United States, and this is true of all businesses. I happen to know a lot about restaurants, and I talk about that, but this is true of all businesses. I don't care where you're at. If you're good at it, stick with it. Try to make what you're doing better. And just because you can do something don't mean you should do it. Because it may be the one decision you make that will destroy what you're doing. I see businesses constantly diversifying into arenas where they have no skill sets, have no competitive advantage, have no means of being extraordinary in the field they're in. If you're a dentist, stay a dentist. Don't try to run restaurants. And I promise you, I will not try to be a dentist. It's just bad karma. You don't want to do those kind of things. So have a strategic plan for yourself and your business so you can keep on track with where you're going. For the young people, I'm here for the purpose of trying to mentor all the young people in the room. The rest of you folks that are already well established get to listen. To the young people in this room, the most important thing you can do, in my opinion, to be successful in any career is you have to learn something every day. When I first got started at McDonald's, I was scared to death because I did not know how to run a business. And I thought, because my background was science, I could go out and identify rocks and show you where volcanoes live, but I could not run a business. So I started reading 3 books a week. I read 1 book on business every week, and I read books of great leaders. A couple books you might want to think about. There's a book called Freakonomics that was written by a couple guys. And what they do is they look at statistics differently than most people look at statistics. There was another fellow that wrote a book called Blank. And Blank has to do with thinking without thinking. Your intuitive abilities are much stronger and better than you think they are. And so for young people today, I'd recommend that you try to read and learn as much as you can read and learn, because the more knowledge you have, the more valuable you're going to be to your employer. If you start your own business, and I think you should, by the way, start your own business, you need to read and study so you know as much as you can possibly know, and you need to be in a continuous mode of learning the rest of your life. When I was reading 3 books a week, I don't do it so much anymore because I just don't have time anymore like I did back then. I would read 1 book on business. I would read 1 book on history. And I looked at the history of businesses. I looked at the history of countries. I looked at the histories of societies. Because by knowing and understanding your past, you'll better understand your future as you go along. The last book I would read in a week would be Popcorn for My Brain. You know, I eat popcorn to have fun, and I had to have popcorn for my brain because after a while my brain got to a point where I couldn't absorb anymore. So I'd read a murder mystery, or I'd read a romance novel. I'd read just something to clean my brain out. And I ended up with about 5,000 books in my library. I've taken a lot of those books now and started to hand them out to people that I'm working with. I created a business library in the office, and I want people to take those books and give me book reports because I want to know they read them. And I want them to write a note inside the book and say, I read this book, and here's what I think of this book. And periodically, we get together and have lunch or dinner or whatever it may be, and we talk about the books they've read. So all the young people in this room, if you're thinking about starting a business or you're already engaged in a career, please, please, please don't stop learning. This world is changing fast. How many people in here have a smartphone? Oh, finally, you all put your hands up, right? I'll tell you, I've never seen anything like it in my life. The folks in Kuwait are so far ahead of most societies I've been involved in the utilization of this intelligence and this communication tool. It is a fabulous device. Do you realize that in that little handheld phone, put your phone up and turn the light on so I can see them all. Come on. You're holding in your hand more power than existed in computers, in all the computers in 1950 in the United States. I'm a pilot, and in my airplane I had a little box. It was an ocean navigation thing called a Loran. And I put it in my airplane. You weren't allowed to do that legally, but I tied it to my autopilot. And the Loran was designed for coastal waters so ships could keep from running aground and bumping into things they shouldn't bump into. I put that thing in my airplane. just big, just square, about that thick. I could take off I live in an airport community. I could take off and fly to my brother's house and never touch the airplane. That thing was smarter than I was by a long shot. I talked to an old Navy pilot, and he said in World War II they were tinkering around with radar systems and computers for the military, and that power that was in that little box took up a 20 by 20 room on a battleship or a coastal cruiser. And he was amazed at how we had gone from vacuum tubes down to transistors, and now we think about how far we've gone further. How did that happen? See, there's a phone whistling at me right now. We are in an age where communication is instantaneous. Look how these smartphones and tweet accounts and emails and Instagram, it's changing the face of politics around the world. It's incredible the power you young people have in your hand and the things you can do. How are you going to take that wisdom and apply it to your success and your career as you go forward? We're living in an age where information travels very quickly. And you're in business, information is everything. I told the group this morning one of the most important things you can do as an executive running businesses is to be very, very fact-based. You need to do research. You need to do analytics. One of the most important people that I'm hiring in this company I'm running today is somebody that's really good at planning and analysis, because you have to take all the data you can find in your business and you have to analyze it to find trends so you can stay ahead of your customers, so you can stay ahead of your finance and invest your money more wisely than you ever have in the past. And you get instantaneous feedback. I'm putting a survey system into our restaurants that has 3 components. First component is mystery shoppers. People come out to visit the restaurants unannounced, and they fill out very specific forms, and those are mystery shops, very independent, very cold, and very calculating. How was the hospitality? What was the temperature of the food, and such as that. Another is a consumer-based survey project where you get a receipt for your meal, and at the bottom it says, go on the internet and fill out this questionnaire. We'll give you a free dessert, or we'll give you 20% off. And the last one, which is the one I'm most excited about, this is by a company called SMG. They have a mini survey that's an app that's on a smartphone. And they have a huge number of people, young, all under 30, who have this app. And as they go to restaurant to restaurant to restaurants and they experience whatever they experience, they can fill out a survey on their app. And it gets consolidated. And it's going to give us such great insight into what our customers think about us. And I get a report every morning of what happened yesterday. So we're going to have intelligence about how those restaurants run the next business day. So we can start to see whether or not the decisions we're making, the advertising we're doing, is effective, and whether or not it's showing up in the restaurant experience. So if you start your own business or you have your own business, make sure you research the most important tipping points in your restaurant. If you're in a restaurant business, food temperature is a tipping point. If the food's not hot, immediately consumers don't think it's good. And if you can make the plates hot, then they think the food's hot. So you have to have all kinds of signals to the consumer that the food's hot, and then it's speed of service, and then it's hospitality. One of the things you need to do in business, I was very concerned with McDonald's and what McDonald's was doing with hospitality. And I decided to find best practices, and that's something you all need to think about in business as well. So I went to all the companies in the United States that were considered to have the very best practices of service and hospitality. One of the companies was Nordstrom's. Nordstrom's based in Seattle, Washington. That was the last company I went to. And every company I went to, I asked the same set of questions. Do you have videotapes? Do you have, I know we don't use videotapes anymore, but do you have any kind of e-learning devices? Do you have trainings, programs? How do you train your people to be so service-oriented, smile so easily, and really make customers feel good about spending too much money for stuff? That was supposed to be funny, in case you didn't know. And so as I was talking to the training people, the HR people, the CEO of the company was sitting there, and he turned to them and said, well, do we have any of that stuff? You know, what do we have? Because he really wasn't that granular in these companies. And they said, no, we don't have training programs for hospitality. We don't have training programs for customer service. And he kind of looked up at the door in his office, and above the door it says, smile. And the human resource officer said, no, all we do is hire people that smile easily. Because if people don't smile easily, it's hard to get them to smile at all. And they're part of their process for taking applications. When somebody walked in and said, give me an application, now we do it online, and that's another problem. When they walk in, if they ask for an application and they don't smile, we won't give them one. We tell them we're not hiring. Their number one criteria was to hire people that smile easily. Sometimes it's that simple. And if you know and understand the data in your organization of what the driving and tipping points are, things like that make a huge difference competitively. Be very, very analytical and study your data all the time. You know, business is an art in a lot of ways, in science in some other ways. People who are trained financially will look at the balance sheet, they'll look at the assets, they'll look at available cash for investment, and can make really smart, intelligent decisions. Boy, that's a lot of science. But the art of running a business is your customers. And that art can be practiced in a million different ways. One of the most interesting thoughts of management for me is something I've discovered in the last 5 or 6 years. I used to do it and didn't know it. Today I know it and understand it, and that is competitively disruptive management and disruptive leadership is really important. If you look at major corporations, you all know Walmart, I take it. Walmart's one of the most powerful companies in the world. They have a philosophy and a unique selling proposition of everyday low prices on great brands. And they drive cost out of their business every way they possibly can to always be the low-cost provider. They're getting to a point today where they're telling branded products, take your branding off of your products, we'll put our name on it. We don't want you to advertise your products. We'll take care of that because low cost every day is what we're driving, and we're paying for your marketing and your advertising, and we don't want to do that anymore. So what happened? Somebody came along in a very disruptive way and said, even though Walmart is everyday low prices and they're taking care of this category of customer, they're leaving another category of customer on their own that can't really afford Walmart either. And they're the people that are on really low income that want branded products. So companies like Family Dollar, Dollar Store, Dollar Tree have come along, and what they did is they shrunk the size of the products. So instead of a tube of toothpaste being this big, it's now this big. A lot of travelers use those things because they are under the 2.5-ounce liquid requirement. And they're selling everything for $1. It's had a huge impact on Walmart same-store sales because somebody disrupted their model. What does disruptive management mean? Big companies tend to take care of the top 20% of their customers in a very profound way because they don't want to lose them. That leaves the other 80% at the bottom as an opportunity for companies. And if I were an entrepreneur today in this room, a young person thinking about, do I get a job or do I start a business? I'd look at these gentlemen up here in this front row. They're the best mentors, in my opinion, that exist in Kuwait. Trained as dentists, started a blog and a newsletter, opened up clinics, and just opened up and have done what I think is a global, state-of-the-art, #1 dental facility in the world. And I wish I was Warren Buffett because I would give you guys $300 million to buy your company, and I would take that thing globally, and I would make billions of dollars off of what you did. Brilliant. You took an ordinary thing and took it to an extraordinary level just by focusing on customer need and wanting to be innovators and out on the front edge and being transformational leaders in what you're doing. Yesterday I was driving around Kuwait, and there were a couple people in the car talking about how are they going to get started, and if I can be so bold as to talk about them a little bit, because they're very bright young men. They're pharmacists. They were trained in England, and pharmacy in England is different than pharmacy here in Kuwait. And they were talking about when they get done working for the government at the end of 5 years, they're going to open up their own pharmacies, and what are they going to do, how are they going to do it. And I said, you got the perfect lesson right here in the front row. You start off with a blog, you start off with the newsletter, and you start talking about this, and you could go another step. And that is you could start hosting dinners in many of the fine restaurants that exist here in Kuwait, invite 20, 30 people together, and talk about health in general. A lot of people have diabetes. I don't know how big an issue of diabetes are here in Kuwait, but in the United States, diabetes is growing like crazy. It's becoming a very serious health problem. And a lot of people are worried about it. So why not invite 20 prospective customers to come to dinner, have them pay 20 KDs or whatever you call your currency. Did I get that right? KDs? Charge them 20 KDs. They come in, they have a nice meal, and maybe you provide free dessert. But spend a half an hour talking about the implications of diabetes and what it does to your health, what it does to your physical being, and start to educate people on these very significant issues. Brand new parents, what are the issues of pediatrics? What are the issues of raising young children? If you find an opportunity to disrupt the industry and you do it well, you're going to succeed. And people are looking for a new point of view on old problems. People generally want the easy solution, and very often they're not. But one of the easiest solutions to all problems is education. So if these young pharmacists bring together people on a regular basis for the 5 years while they're working for the government, at the end of that time they have cell phone numbers, they've built relationships, they've got email addresses, and they've got a base for their pharmacies when they open it. And I'd go get my teeth cleaned at their place and look at what they're doing, and I would copy their best practices in my pharmacy if I were those young men. In every business, I don't care what it is, you young people have an incredible advantage, and you should start your own business, but don't start out thinking you're going to be the CEO of General Electric. You're going to be the CEO of a company that's going to struggle for a very long time. It's going to take 10 years of very hard work to be successful. And you need to find best practices everywhere you can find them. I mean, you need to utilize those best practices. If I were in Kuwait, I would study you guys like crazy. You've done so many things so perfectly. I mean, when you think about dentistry and you think about children, it's a frightening thought. You walk into their floor where they have dentistry for children, and it's a wonderland. They've got 3D animals coming out of the walls. They got bright, vibrant colors. A child goes in there, you know, it's fun. Well, right up to the point that you stick your hands in their mouth, and then maybe it's not so much fun after that. For the young people in this room, if you decide that you want to open your own business, and I would recommend you do that, you're going to have more failures than you're going to have successes, but that's okay. Do you want a job? Do you want a career? Do you want to own, or do you want to be a participant? These are tough questions to answer, but if you put together a strategic plan for yourself, you analyze yourself and understand what your most common characteristics are in your leadership style. If you put your people and your customers first, you're ultimately going to be successful if you reach out to all the best practices and apply them to your own business. I had a discussion this morning, as I said, with a lot of McDonald's people, and you know, I'm constantly amazed at how dumb business people can be. I had occasion to go work as a member of the due diligence team to buy a major fast food company in the United States, and I got to do due diligence. And having come from McDonald's, and this company was a competitor of ours, I was very curious as to why they did certain things. So I got out of the due diligence mode and got into the competitive mode. And I asked their senior vice president of innovation, I said, why is it when you put breakfast in your restaurant, you focused on croissants as opposed to biscuits and things like that and muffins? I said, nobody in your company can spell it. Nobody's ever baked one, and your customers have never eaten one. And croissants are a very delicate pastry, and when you put breakfast meats on it and eggs and cheeses, they just collapse and turn it into a grease ball. And I said, why don't you just do what McDonald's did? And this was the answer. We never do anything McDonald's does because we're not McDonald's. Yeah, and you're not number two either. If you look at Coke and Pepsi, two of the most profound colas in the world, and how they struggled with each other for 150 years, just looking at each other's best practices, looking at market share, looking at data, just slugging it out in the marketplace every day. Because they slugged it out every day, they were 1 and 2 in different categories. Coke was number 1 in the fountain business, and Pepsi was number 1 in the salty snack grocery store business, and back and forth. You can't find a number 3 cola in the world. There's little small players all over the place, but nobody big. If you do everything the best does, the worst thing that's going to happen to you is you're going to be number 2 in the category. Jack Walsh and I had a discussion one time. He, the former head of General Electric, and he had a policy or a strategic thought in his company that you should never be in any category except number 1 in that category. They were never interested in being number 2 in any category. But something that's interesting, in a lot of businesses, in business products, being number 2 is more profitable than being number 1. I'll give you an example of something. McDonald's had a lot of people in our real estate evaluation and selection process. Literally hundreds of people doing real estate analysis. Should we build there or shouldn't we? Our highest penetration was in Cleveland, Ohio, where we had 1 restaurant for every 26,000 restaurants. Where do you put the next restaurant with those kind of numbers? That kind of penetration is incredible. And they were one of the highest volume markets we had. Why? Because we could leverage the market. We owned the advertising. All Burger King and Wendy's had to do, our major competitors, was to build next door to us. They didn't have to spend a dime on real estate development. Now, it was to their regret ultimately, but sometimes you can make more money being number 2 than you can being number 1 because you don't have to spend the money to get the number 1. It's more efficient in some ways. Well, having that kind of discussion with Jack was very intimidating for me because he is a really smart guy, very capable executive. He's a command and control guy, by the way. His leadership style is command and control. So in any event, there's a lot of moving parts if you want to open and start your own business. I would suggest to every young person in this room, when you look at the titles, oh, hi. I didn't know I was back. Hey. Pretty good, huh? I'd never seen the back of my head before. That's interesting. When you think about what you're going to be doing for the rest of your lives, you're going to have to take a little bit of risk early, but make sure you're very, very calculated in what you do. Make sure you have a thoughtful plan. Make sure you have a clear understanding of what you're going to do. And the last thing I'm going to tell you about that is don't give up. Because the minute you give up and quit might be exactly 1 minute before you become successful. Business is legend with people that tried to sell something to somebody forever, and then at the last minute they got the sale that took their company to where it needed to go. Don't give up on your dreams. Don't do it. Go out there and find somebody to help you achieve your dream. All the young people in this room need a mentor. Mentors come in all sizes and shapes and flavors. You're in this room here today, and there's a lot of very successful business people in this room. So all you young people, you should collect business cards from them and ask them the question, would you be interested in mentoring me? A true story. About 7 years ago, I was flying on an airplane from New York to Miami, Florida. And I sat next to a young fellow by the name of Jonathan Lennon, who was going to Miami to meet his girlfriend. and he wanted to ask her to marry him. But she didn't want to move to New York, and he was an investment banker. He was 25, 6 years old. And he had talked people into giving him $20 million for a fund that he could practice being an investor with. They took a lot of risk in him, but he's a very smart young man. Not so smart when it comes to the affairs of the heart. He said, well, could you help me? He said, I'm going to Miami. I'm going to meet my girlfriend. I'm going to ask her to marry me, and I'm going to ask her to move to New York, but she doesn't want to go. She wants to live in Miami. And I said, this is simple. You get off the plane, you walk up to her, and you say, I love you very much. I want to marry you, but you're going to have to move to New York with me because that's where our base is going to be. That's where investment banking takes place. And if she gives you a hug and says, okay, get back on the plane and go to New York and be happy. If she says no, you get back on the plane, go to New York, find another lady to fall in love with because you're never going to change her mind. Don't waste her time or yours. It's painful, but just get the business over with. Well, he said, called me up a couple weeks later. He had been talking to me about Green Mountain Coffee. He made a big investment in that company at a very early age. He's now 30. He just turned 30. A year ago, he invested in a new restaurant company. Not an old restaurant company, but it was a new investment for him. The company was 20 years old. He said, Ed, would you go on the board of directors and help me with this? I said, Jonathan, you're wearing me out. I get a phone call a week from you about something or other. I said, yeah, but I'll go on the board to help you out. So I went on the board. It's the luckiest thing he ever did because they were screwed up, and they needed me far more than I realized. And when I got in the middle of it, we had to make a lot of changes. The CEO quit for a lot of different reasons. So the board said to me, well, would you take over as a temporary CEO? I said, sure, I'll do it for 4 months, 5 months, whatever, till I find a replacement, get them up to run, and then I'll go away. Let's get a restaurant person in here instead of a marketing person to run the company. Well, at the annual meeting in April, we had a dust up with the board. In May, they made me, first I was the interim CEO, then I was the permanent interim CEO, and then I became the temporary CEO, and then I became the permanent CEO. So I've decided to work there until I'm 108, another 38 years. Actually, I'm going to work there for 5 years and let somebody else take over. But I mentored Jonathan Lennon. I took a chance on him. Somebody will take a chance on you, but you got to ask enough people. So what you do is you collect business cards from everybody you meet. I carry my business cards in my back pocket like this. I'll show you. I got a wad of them in my back pocket. I give a business card to everybody that asks me for one or anybody I meet new. I collect business cards. It is your golden Rolodex. And how many of you young people, I don't want you old folks to put your hand up, how many of you young folks have business cards? How many of you that are unemployed thinking about what you're going to do with the rest of your life have business cards? Put your hands up. Come on, get them up in the air. I'm going to tell you why this is important. People may want to get a hold of you. You give them a business card, they got a record of you. Now, with these new smartphones and stuff, you can take a photograph, put them in your files electronically. But you know what those business cards are? That's your golden Rolodex, because as you grow and develop, they will grow and develop. And you're going to be meeting people the rest of your life at conferences and different places that you met a long time ago. It's your golden Rolodex. You know what a Rolodex is? That's an old guy's file for business cards and contact information. Today you do it on your smartphones. I get that. But I had a Rolodex. I'm a analog kind of guy, not a digital guy. The other thing about that is you should keep a journal every day. You should write in a book every day what you heard, what you saw, what you learned, what confused you. You need to do that, because that's the book you're going to publish when you're 60 years old and very successful, and everybody's asking you, how did you do it? What made you successful? I do a lot of public speaking with young people. I talk to a lot of colleges and universities and what have you. They always ask me the same thing. What made you successful? And I say the same thing. I work harder than anybody you've ever met in your life. I study like crazy. I read everything I get my hands on. I try to learn as much as I can learn all the time. got lucky going to work for McDonald's. I had great bosses that mentored me. Goodness gracious, I couldn't have done it by myself. Nobody can be successful by themselves. They need people around them. They need their people that are their subordinates and the people that lead them. The last thought I'm going to leave you with, always get your boss promoted, because when you do that, there's a leadership vacuum behind them, and they will bring you along, because everybody wants their team around them as they progress through organizations and institutions. So the bottom line of all this is know yourself, be fact-based, give something back to the community, walk softly on this earth. It's the only one we have. Treat man and beast well. Enjoy your life, and never stop learning, because learning is the most important thing you're ever going to do the rest of your life. So with that, I will try to be quiet, which is really hard for me to do, and entertain your questions. And we're going to stay here and have a conversation for as long as you want to be here, because I stay up late and I work hard. So, Mr. Moderator, this is my new best friend. He's been asking me questions nonstop for 3 days. He asked really good questions. The first day I met him, he was doing a blog thing, which I'm not sure what a blog sounds ugly.
I don't call it blog anymore.
Okay. What do you call it now?
A website.
Oh, he's got a website. You know, I knew a spider once that had a site that was building webs. Okay, anyway, he asked very insightful questions, and he started asking me questions, and we were sitting in a room back here. He scared me, because nobody this young ought to be that smart.
Thank you so much for the compliment.
About
really
being smart or young?
Well, both.
Good, let's get some questions from
Awesome.
these folks.
Want to have a seat?
No. What?
Wow.
How am I going to get you guys to the United States so I can franchise your business? I'm really good at franchising, huh? No small plans. Don't open up hospitals, by the way, because you're really good at dentistry, not hospitals. I've decided that. I'm going to give you that advice for free. Okay, let's go.
Awesome. Well, there is one dilemma about leadership, which is leadership you are born with or you acquire it with time? I know I asked you about this on podcast, but I want to get your thoughts.
Well, you asked that question, is leadership innate, are you born with it, or is it developed? People have asked me that question in the past, and I thought about it, but I didn't really care. As long as you have it, that's what's important. I think it's both. I think all of us are born innately with some leadership skills and growth skills. How we develop that is really up to us. What do we read? How do we read it? When do we read it? What do we study? What do we know? Who do we meet with? So I think in some ways it's both. I think you're born with some characteristics. Like, I don't have the personality of a Ben and Jerry. Those guys are just sweet, nice guys. Most people, when I walk into a room, want to know what I'm mad about, because I just don't smile easily, and I have to work at it.
Tell me about it. The first day we met over here.
Yeah, you were scared, right?
Yeah,
so was I.
Big time.
So I think there's characteristics you're born with, but I think you can develop your leadership skills. If you know yourself personally, you can begin to amplify your strengths and minimize your weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And you need to ask the people you work with every day or that are around you, if you were me, what would you do different? How would you behave differently? Mm-hmm. What are we doing?
Well, I'm doing my tech stuff backstage, so you don't have to worry about it.
You want me to sit down?
No, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. Just put the wire over here, so we'll use it in a minute.
Okay.
Well, the reason why I'm having a wire, because we have a hashtag, Ask Tmkeen, and instead of you guys, because all of you have mobiles, you ask the question in a hashtag on Twitter, and we will take your questions from the screen. So everybody will be having the ability to ask, and beautifully, you have only 146 characters for a question. All right? So be so smart.
Wait, do I have to give my answers in 146 characters?
I really wish you could do.
I can't do that.
So you can take as much questions from the audience as well.
All right.
So the challenge right now with entrepreneurs running their own businesses, or they are thinking of starting their own business, is there is that hierarchy where you have at the top is you, and then there is the second level is you and you, and there is you. And entrepreneurs, they think they have to do everything by themselves. What's your thought about that?
Well, entrepreneurs, I have a different opinion about what entrepreneurship is than most people. I think entrepreneurs do not like to take risk, and they like to have partners to help share that risk. No manager is an island. You need people around you that are smart and capable. And if you think you can do everything, you're going to wear yourself out and you're going to fail. That's characteristic of a command and control leadership style, where they want to be in control of everything. I had a relationship with a American football coach by the name of Dick Vermeil, and he was in the Super Bowl, and he literally sat down at the beginning of the season and took legal pads, yellow legal pads, were 17 inches long and 8.5 inches wide, and every line on every tablet he wrote down what he would do every minute of every day for the entire football season. And the last entry he made on the 21st tablet was get to the Super Bowl. Went to the Super Bowl and got killed, annihilated. And I saw him about 2 weeks after the game, and I said, Dick, what happened? He said, the last entry should have been win the Super Bowl, and I needed another pad to write on that what I should have done that I didn't do. He said, I figured once I got there, it would take care of itself because we had a whole season of success. You can't win any game by yourself. You need teams around you. You need people around you. And I think one of the best characteristics of a strong leader is that they hire people smarter than they are, and they hire people that are more capable than they are, and allow them to do their job. The toughest thing in the world for a boss to do is to let their people do their job, because they're going to make mistakes and they're going to fail. And you've got to learn to live with the consequences of that.
Sure. So this is the biggest challenge that we see as entrepreneurs when we actually meet talented people sometimes. But the biggest challenge is, what is the number one thing that we could look at the person or the function? Which one is the most important one, in your personal opinion?
I don't think there is one thing ever. The world is complex. People are complex. Institutions are complex. You need a variety of people. I try to hire people that are very diverse in beliefs, in their behaviors, and how they think about problems, because you get smarter. If you surround people exactly like yourself, if you surround yourself with people exactly like yourself, then what do you need them for? You've already got yourself. You need diversity of opinion. You need strength of character. I think that the more interesting people you have around you, the more successful you're going to be. I'm going to say this, and I don't want it to sound in a negative way. Take a long time before you hire somebody. Mm-hmm. If you own a business and you're going to hire people, make sure you really understand who they are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, where they need help, and what kind of contribution they can make to the organization. Take your time and make sure your hiring process is thorough and complete. Once they're hired, trained, and well managed, if they don't fit in, get rid of them fast. So I always say hire slow, fire fast.
Well, it was in my mind. I just want to say that cliche, and you picked it up.
Say that again?
It was in my mind, and you actually said it, which is hire slow and fire fast. So that's one of the things which is profound. Ed, you were the president and CEO of McDonald's, and then you left the company and you started your own. What was the biggest challenge for you to quit your job and move and start all over again?
Well, quitting my job was easy because I didn't like the guy I was going to have to work for. And I didn't want to be a problem from him because he and I would have been fighting every day of the week. Mm-hmm. And you can only have one leader in an institution. And I was running North America, and he was running the global company. And he didn't believe that McDonald's could work in the future. And I knew I couldn't live with that. In fact, I went to lunch with him the last day I was in the office. And he said to me, all right, Ed, you're leaving. What's the last piece of advice you're going to give me? And I said, Jack, keep the bathrooms clean. And he looked at me, and it's like, you know what? That's exactly what's wrong with this company. All you operations guys think about is operations. You never think about the bigger picture. I said, no, Jack, let me tell you something. You think you're running a $65 billion corporation, but you're not. You're running one restaurant. And you don't even run them all because the franchisees run most of them. But you're running one restaurant. It's a $3 million restaurant that makes about 15% profit. It's just one. Now, we run 36,000 of them on street corners all over the world. But we only run one restaurant 36,000 times. You think you're running a big company. If you don't keep the bathrooms clean and keep the food hot and keep the service good, you're going to start losing customers. And we've got an infrastructure that needs $65 billion to keep it functioning. And if you have a 10% decline in sales, you're not going to have the money to run the company. Keep the bathrooms clean. Keep your customers happy. Keep the food hot. Do the basic fundamental things, and the rest of it will take care of itself. Just couldn't get that into his head. I mean, you know, he was a finance guy. Never put a financial guy in charge of an operating company unless they know how to operate. Now, I got to tell you, there's some financial guys that are outstanding operators, but they worked hard at it, and they mastered the craft. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for them because I love operations, and I don't know a thing about finance. I would not want to have to manage a world economy because I couldn't do it.
Well, I'll take another.
I can't even balance my own checkbook, by the way.
I'll take another direction right now because some of the people over here, they don't have businesses yet. They have ideas, and they want to start their own businesses. How to evaluate an idea to start up a business upon it?
Well, you don't start out a business as the CEO of a company and expect to operate as a legitimate, ongoing entity. If somebody has an idea and they want to start a business, they ought to get involved in a business similar. Like I talked to a person this week that has a 25-year-old daughter, and she wants to open up a bakery because she's a really good baker. But here's the problem. When she goes to the market, she buys the best oils, the best spices, the best flavorings, the best flours, and she builds an apple pie that's probably priced at 10 times what the market can bear because she buys the best of everything and she handcrafts it. Well, if you open up a business, you got to make more than one pie a day. You got to make a lot of pies. And, you know, I said, well, she needs to go to work in a bakery. She needs to learn the bakery craft, not the cooking craft. She knows how to bake. What she doesn't know is how to run a business. And just because you can bake an apple pie doesn't mean you can sell an apple pie and make a profit. And one of the great tragedies in the United States today is restaurant failures. You know, we open up X number of restaurants, and about that number fail every year. And the reason why restaurants fail so fast is because people who go out to eat and like an idea or a concept said, well, I can do that. I know how to eat. And I know what good food tastes like. That's the easiest part of a restaurant is knowing how good food tastes. Managing a business that has a 36% or 35% labor component is very, very difficult. So if there's a young person here in the audience that's got an idea that they want to start a business, I recommend that you go to work in that industry and learn as much as you can about finance and treasury and economics and profitability and cash flow and learn all those business things and learn how to manufacture the product you're going to sell and what the implications of that are. And then you can go start your business. Mm-hmm. You know, I could not go out and start McDonald's today. In fact, I tried. When I left McDonald's, I opened up a hamburger place in Chicago, 5 of them. And I'm a pretty good hamburger guy. I had to close 2 of them because they were really rotten locations. Because in my brain, I was building a McDonald's restaurant, and this wasn't a McDonald's restaurant. Totally different characteristics. I got 3 right and 2 wrong. Well, what's the math? You can't have that kind of failure rate and be successful. And this is a guy that's got 50 years worth of restaurant experience. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to open up a business, you better be darn sure you know what the implications of that are. And you got to go to school. A 25-year-old is not going to know what a 55-year-old knows. Sure. And a banker does not know how to run a restaurant. And a restaurant guy does not know how to run a bank. Mm-hmm. Stay in your field of expertise.
Some of the business owners or people with ideas, they prefer to make the product perfect and then launch it in the market. And some of them, they would say, let's take the product to the market before even perfecting it, test the market if they accept or not, and actually improve it and make it better. Which approach would you recommend for entrepreneurs to take?
Well, I believe in continuous improvement and rapid continuous improvement. There's always a balance between product quality, services, and goods vis-a-vis profitability. The market for Rolls-Royces and Bentleys and those kinds of cars is very small. And you have to have incredible craftsmanship to be able to build those cars. And in order to get a $300,000 U.S. price on that car is very difficult. Mm-hmm. Or you can build a Fiat, as Chrysler Fiat's doing in the United States today, that's extremely functional, gets good gas mileage, is economical, does everything it needs to do because it's basic transportation. In one case, you have a love mark. In the other case, you have a commodity. Mm-hmm. Both those cars went to market. The cost content of this one demands a $300,000 price point. The content of this one demands a $35,000 price. You know, I say if you're going to take a product to market, you better have it as right as you can possibly make it when it goes to market within the niche you're trying to fill. Because if you go there with something less perfect and you try to perfect it, your customers will not forgive you. In this day and age, customers want what they pay for. And value is a definition that they get to create themselves, not you. You know, it's a function of cost and price and a lot of different attributes. And if you don't have the value right, which means the quality of the product, you're going to fail. Mm-hmm. You can't fix products fast enough to keep people happy because once they've had... This is a problem today in the digital age. If I go buy a new product and it's no good, I can tell 1 billion people in 10 seconds. 50 years ago, if I went to market and bought a product, I maybe tell 10 people in a week. You can't afford to make those mistakes anymore. When you go to market, you better have a good product. And it better be good for the majority of the people, not the minority of the people. You know, so my philosophy is get it right the first time and then improve on it even further as you go forward. Add bells, whistles, and features. Look at the Apple model. They came out with their first phone. Coming over here, I went into the AT&T store where my Apple phone guy is, and I said, hey, I'm going to Kuwait. Do I need it? He said, nah, just turn on your roaming and you're good. He said, it's going to be expensive, but it's okay because I got work to do, so I got to do it. I was trying to download an upgrade. He said, well, don't do that because you'll ruin the phone. I said, what are you talking about? He said, don't download that because it's going to mess your phone up. You should buy the new phone, the 6, but they're not going to be available because we're out of inventory right now. But you could order it online directly from Apple and get it 2 weeks faster. And I'm thinking to myself, Apple's got a program where they make their own stuff obsolete by upgrading it, forcing me to buy a new phone about every 3 years.
Well, they are not forcing you. The salesperson is forcing you. Which phone do you have?
I don't know, what is that thing?
5S?
4S?
4S?
Don't tell me
It will be slow a bit.
So it's going to be slow, huh?
It's going to be slow, yeah.
I don't mind being slow.
I'm a computer engineer, so I'm giving you the tip. So I'm being honest. So you have to upgrade to 5S at least.
Buy it for me. Buy me a new phone.
Ali Ibrahim would do that at Tmkeen.
All right, let's talk to these people instead of me and you.
Okay, so let's take questions.
Well, plug your thing in over there, whatever you got to do.
Well, great.
You know how to do that.
You're curious to.
I'm going to watch him, see if he knows what he's doing. Let me get this out of your way. Uh-oh. You know, you'd think technology, you could do this wireless. Okay, these questions are in Arabic. This is going to be a problem for me. Oh, here's a very good question. It says, how can you find the unwritten rules of a company? I call that tribal knowledge. And tribal knowledge is really important to understand the culture of any business because these businesses all have different personalities. And if you don't understand the personality and Don't you have wireless? Boy, guys, got to use
I
a
have
cable.
wireless, but if I use it,
realistically,
people will jump
if you're a new employee in a company, it's important to observe what goes on and listen to people and engage with people and talk to them about what the unwritten rules are and how do you really function. And Don Hudson yesterday talked about something I found very interesting, and I'll share something with you. In McDonald's, we had a design department that worked on the blueprints for new buildings and lot layouts and what have you. And we got a new architect came to work for the company. And one of our young men wanted to prove to the new boss how hardworking he was. So he watched the boss. And he would stay there and work, and the boss would stay there and work, and the boss was leaving about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. So this young person thought he ought to stay there and work for 8:30 to 9 o'clock at night. And this went on for about a month and a half. And finally the boss goes to the young man and says, "Why in the world are you staying here so late? Can't you get your work done on time?" And the kid says, "Well, no, I was trying to impress you with how hard I'm working, because you stay here till 8 o'clock every night." He says, "Yeah, that's because my family is in Nebraska, and I got no place to go except back to the hotel, so I'd rather stay here and work. But as soon as my family gets here, I'm leaving at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at the latest." You know, the person observed what their boss was doing and thought that was what should be done, instead of going to the boss and saying, "You know, you're working pretty late. Is there anything I can do to help you?" And the boss would have said, "Nah, I'm just staying here because my family's not here yet. Why don't you go on home?" Or the young man could have said, "Well, why don't we go to dinner? I'd like to learn more about you, and I'd like to know, because you're here by yourself, and maybe you could teach me something so I could be better at my job." It's an approach. How do you find the unwritten rules of a company? You go find out. You ask questions. You discover. You listen. You talk. You engage. But you better know the rules, because those are the rules that really count as you move forward. It says, okay. It says, what are the most common unwritten rules that I've come across in my experience? Largely, bosses who are command and control are dangerous to be around, because they're very often very impulsive, and if you don't do exactly what they want, you're going to get into trouble fast. So every time I've ever had an unwritten rule in any institution I've been involved in, I was at Snap-on Tools, Great Wolf Resorts, 10 other companies, usually that's a big problem with command and control leadership styles.
So name one of your best problem-solving traits when it comes to leadership.
One of my best problem-solving traits when it comes to leadership. I know, first of all, I don't have all the answers. So when my employees come to me and say, "Hey, Ed, blah, 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 what would you do about this?" the first thing out of my mouth is, "If you were in charge of this company, what would you do?" Because the answer to every problem in every corporation is found within the employees. I had a conversation with Roger Penske. I don't know if you know who Roger Penske is, but he's a very, very important businessman in the United States and has grown his company dramatically. General Motors Corporation basically gave him Detroit Diesel. He bought it at a very low price. And they have two major customers, transportation and yachts. And the company was losing money like crazy. And he turned the company around in 18 months and really got it on track, making money. The product improved dramatically. And I was at a board meeting with him at NASCAR, and I said, "Roger, what in the world did you do to turn that company around so fast?" He said, "Well, I went down on the factory floor in all of our factories and talked to the people running the machinery. And I asked them, what would you do if you could do anything to change this company, make it better, improve the quality? What would you do?" And he said, and I had my team with me, and we made notes, and we looked, and we picked the lowest fruit, the lowest hanging fruit first, did what they suggested. We created committees within the company to analyze machinery and setup and all the rest of it. And General Motors had neglected that factory for so long that the equipment didn't work right. And it was causing a drop in productivity. And employees kept saying, "Fix my machine, fix my machine, fix my machine." And he did. He said to me, all the problems of that company could be identified by the people on the factory floor, and right next to them stood a person that had the solution to the problem. So my first instinct is to ask my people, what's going on? What do you think I can do to fix this? What are our customers saying? How do you think we should react? And I used to have town hall meetings in our company every day of the week. I would bring in 10 store managers from around the United States and Canada and Mexico. I would bring in store managers, hourly employees, and I would have roundtable discussions for hours on what was going on in their restaurant, what they liked, what they didn't like, because my belief is your employees are customers first and employees second. If you treat your employees as if they were customers with the same level of dignity and engage them in the same way, they're going to give you the answers you need to be successful. So I paid very, very close attention to the company employees. Additionally, I would have monthly meetings with franchisees from all over North America. I had one every month. I'd invite 20 franchisees in, and I'd take one full day, and we'd just sit in a room and talk about the business. And there was no agenda. I would say, what's on your mind? Tell me what you think. Tell me what you know. Tell me what you're worried about. And I always asked them to bring a wish list with them when they came to the meeting. What are the 10 things that you would like to do differently, change, or create to make this company a better company? I always ask for wish lists. At the annual budgeting process, all of our regional vice presidents, we had 40 of them, they had an obligation to bring me 10 things on their wish list, and it had no budgetary constraints. They could come in and present their business case for one of those things. And I would always pick 1, 2, or 3 from every vice president and fund it outside the budget, because I wanted to give them failure money. If it was in the budget and it failed, there were consequences. If it was outside the budget and it failed, there were less consequences. And I wanted to stimulate their thinking. So, you know, my problem-solving behavior is to be inclusive and transparent and ask the people to know, what should we do different?
Awesome. Is it possible to lead, let's say, risk in any company and to generate a profit?
Oh, sure. You know, profit management is a function of, you know, being more efficient every day. And, you know, I think about customer value first and profit second, because if you think about profit first, you may miss a sales opportunity. So I start over here to get to here. Here's my hierarchy. People, good high-quality people will generate sales, and efficiency of operation will yield profit. So people first, sales second, profit third, because profit is the result of people driving sales. And you can buy business or you can recruit business, and you cannot force performance. You can manage performance. So I always start off with the people first and work my way down to profit.
Okay. During your position as a CEO and president of McDonald's, what 2 ideas or 2 things that you have done with McDonald's to turn the company around, and was it effective?
Well, in every case that McDonald's got into trouble, we turned to our franchisees, because company people don't have any investment in the business. They get a salary no matter what. When they leave and go home at night, they don't have to think about the business, so they're not going to get a paycheck the next day. Franchisees go home, they never stop thinking about the business. So when the business gets into trouble, my bias was always to call in the franchisees and say, what do we got to do different? And I used to say, what are the 10 things that every franchisee must know every day? What are the 10 things a store manager must know every day? And try to reduce it to a process and a procedure and a system to take away the idiot factor in what we were doing. So whenever the company got into trouble, I turned to the franchisees first and foremost.
Okay. Next question. How can I open a company and I'm a recent graduate from the university and I don't have the capital?
If you just recently graduated from university and let your ultra wealthy, I wouldn't expect you to have the money to open a business. And oh, by the way, you shouldn't open a business anyway, because you don't have enough knowledge, experience, or capability unless it's something that's in your wheelhouse and you're going to work at it very long. You're going to work at it a long time before you make any money. So my recommendation is don't try to start a business right out of college unless you're well skilled in an area where you're going to open up that business.
Okay. We'll jump from business to a bit of social right now. How we could change the local community through leadership?
Say it again. How could you change?
How could we change local community through leadership?
Oh, I think every business has to be a good citizen. And I think businesses need to be involved in communities. And I think every business on the face of the earth today better pay attention to what's going on. Whether you believe in global warming or not, there's a lot of people that do, and they function out of that mindset. So if you don't think about how your company fits into that, you're making a terrible mistake because you're going to get left behind. Because this is going to keep marching forward whether we like it or not. I had a discussion this morning, or maybe it was yesterday, about genetically modified foods. I have one point of view about that that's very much based on my science background. But from a consumer perception standpoint, they're afraid of it. So don't try to cram GMO down their throat. It's easy to just say no. Let the science develop over time, and the culture may grow into it one of these days. But don't be on the front edge of controversial issues. Try to work with the community to make the communities better. I try to do that through charity, by the way. As an example, I started a hamburger company in Chicago, as I mentioned. One of the things that I did is I said that all of our charity work was going to be for people under the age of 18 in the area of health and well-being, the arts, and education. So we went into schools and did lectures on marketing and finance and businesses. And then we did burger competitions. We let competing schools build hamburgers to their own recipes. They had to advertise it with social media within their schools. And then we put it on the menu in our restaurant. And the winning burger became known by how many people bought it. So if they did a better job of advertising and people came back and bought it for a month, that winning hamburger went on our menu, and we gave 10% of the sales of that burger to that school. And one of the things we did is we didn't just put it in the general treasury. We bought something they needed. So if they needed musical instruments, if they needed books for the library, if they wanted a telescope for their astronomy class, we would buy that device and give it to the school. And that allowed us to get into the schools. We were suddenly part of social media, and we were doing community outreach. It made the schools better, made us better, and we got a relationship. So I think corporations can find ways to do good outreach to the community and use it as a sales building tool. But you got to be creative.
Awesome. Next question, how to build a team? And I would add to it, of A players.
How to build a team and do what?
And have A players in the team, not just build a team. A world-class team, I would say.
Every employee thinks they're an A player. And some of them are and some of them aren't. But every person that I've ever been associated with in businesses, they all have strengths and weaknesses, and the job of a leader is to look at those strengths and amplify them and find those weaknesses and change them. And so anytime an employee fails, I blame it on the boss. You know, I never fired anybody at McDonald's ever, except 2 guys I fired for fraud, that I caught them in a fraudulent situation. Everybody else, I coached them every day. All the people that worked for me knew every day exactly what I thought of them, where their strengths and weaknesses were, and what my expectations were. I spent a lot of time with the people to really get to know them, because at a senior level of a company, you're really responsible for managing those teams. So if you don't get involved with them personally, you're never going to have a good team until you're willing to give more of yourself to them than you ask of them for you.
The second question, how to push forward into a global brand after being successful as a local brand?
I'm not sure every local brand ought to push forward globally. You know, I don't think there'll be another McDonald's. You know, when I look at the restaurant development in the United States, it seems like these chains get to somewhere between 600 and 1,000 and stop. And usually what it is, and I can see this happening with Steve Ells at Chipotle, he's already working on an Asian concept. Entrepreneurs believe if they did it once, they can do it multiple times. And I find most entrepreneurs can only do it once. And every time they diversify into another field, they get into trouble. And if they stick to their knitting, they're more successful. But you don't get to be, McDonald's is 60 years old. 60, it took 60 years to get to where they're at today. It could take 10 minutes to go the other direction. So I think if you've got a really rock-solid global, local business, that's what you ought to focus on. If it's going to grow, it'll grow.
Second question, is it true that the company should spend more money into ads than the food quality? And how's that?
Should spend more money
into ads rather than
advertising?
Advertising. Ads.
Oh, I am dead set against that. The world of advertising, first of all, has changed dramatically. You no longer in the United States, you can't buy TV ads and be successful. It just doesn't work. The market's changed. I had the president of NBC about 20 years ago say to me, the broadcast networks will be lucky to hang on to 50% of the market in the next 15 years. In fact, they're now below 40%. Advertising has changed dramatically. Digital marketing is, Don Hudson talked about this yesterday. Digital marketing is, at this point, an art and not a science. And it's going to have to become a science before people can really understand how to market digitally. And people that are on the receiving end need to be skeptical about digital marketing because, you can contrive things very easily and broadcast it. And I know that there's a world-famous hamburger restaurant that's spending pretty close to $30 million on digital marketing. And that digital marketing is being run by people 50 years old. If I'm going to have a digital marketing department, every one of them is going to be under 25. Because it's an art form right now, and I don't understand the art. No restaurant or business can advertise their way out of bad performance. If you got bad products, bad service, bad employees, I don't care how many TV ads you buy or radio ads you buy or how much digital marketing, you can't fix those problems. So I always have a bias of saying put your dollars into your product quality, your people, your processes, and your systems. And then once you have that running the way it should, then you can advertise. But the best advertising on the face of the earth is word of mouth. What do your customers say about you to their friends and neighbors? I had a study done at Harvard University going back almost 30 years ago now, and I said this was a graduate student writing a thesis on marketing research. And as a project, I paid this person $100,000 to find out what are the 10 most important questions that you can ask of a consumer to have insight as to what the future is going to look like and how you're running your business and so on. And so he wrote this paper, and we ended up with 10 questions. But the professor who was helping us and advising this young man said that you only need to ask one question. And that question is, would you recommend this business to a family, friend, to the family, or to a friend? If they say no, then ask the other questions. If they say yes, stop and move on to the next set of customers. Because if you don't feel good enough about this business to recommend it to somebody, and so it's an easy thing to start balancing these issues, when you know what your customers think about your products.
Would it be efficient even if they say yes to ask them why as well?
Well, the answer to that is yes. It depends on what you're doing the research for. If you just want to find out how well the product is functioning and how well the restaurant's running, the first question is enough. The follow-up questions only come when you get a negative response. And then you need to do follow-up questions. Now, if you want more texture, like if you put a product into a restaurant and you want to know how it's performing, you got to ask a lot of questions. That's why they have focus groups and deeper market research. But the top-level operating stuff is pretty easy to figure out. When you go deeper down in, when you invent chicken McNuggets or McRib at McDonald's and it sells really well, it'll sell really well for exactly 6 weeks. By then, you've gone through your entire cycle of customers. At the end of 6 weeks, if the sales drop off, they don't like it. If the sales continue to go up, they like it. So you don't need to do a lot of research to figure that out. If it fails in 3 days, boy, you better find out why fast, because you missed something in the early research.
What is the greatest obstacle you faced while managing McDonald's?
The greatest asset I had was the people.
Obstacle.
Pardon?
Obstacle.
I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
The greatest. He should learn to wait, don't you think?
You can
The
remember.
greatest asset I had at McDonald's was my people and my team. The biggest obstacle I had in McDonald's was my people and my team. Because managing people is an everyday function all day long, every day. And when they get out of bed in the morning and the cat scratches them, they have a flat tire in their car, and whatever life may bring them, when they get to work, they can be very grumpy. And that grumpiness spills over to everybody else. And pretty soon, personalities become more significant than function. And so the greatest opportunity I had was people, and the greatest obstacle I had was people. The greatest, because remember I said, people, sales, and profit. Managing complex teams is never easy because their egos get in the way. They want to curry favor with the boss. They want to get promoted. I couldn't stand people that agreed with me every day because I knew damn well I was doing stupid things, and they should tell me I'm doing stupid things. So people are your greatest asset and your greatest obstacle.
Awesome, awesome. I'll take the gentleman question right now.
That's a good idea.
He went to all my accounts on Instagram and started liking everything just to show on the screen. I've been watching.
Hello, Mr. Rensi. How are you?
Good. You can call me Ed.
Hello, Ed. I have a question. You have a very scientific background, and you talk a lot about being very analytical, taking data to make decisions and stuff like that. And then you mentioned the book Blink, which is all about intuition. So how does intuition play a role in your management style and your decision-making?
Really, really important question. The most complex, least efficient, most efficient, best computer on the face of the earth is your brain. We have no idea what our brains are capable of. And we surprise ourselves every day. And intuition is an accumulation of every experience you've ever had, both internally and externally. And I'm going to go way back to the turn of the century. Hilton Hotels. Baron Hilton placed a bid on a piece of property in New York to build a hotel. And he writes about this in his book. And he woke up in the middle of the night and got a hold of his real estate guy and said, change the bid. I want you to increase it $25,000 because that's what it's going to take to get that property. And they got the property. They got the bid. And so everybody came up to him and said, wow, were you lucky to do that? No. He said, I've got a lot of years' experience in buying property for hotels, and I just knew intuitively that I needed to do this. If you look at that book and you read it, there's a story in there about people looking at some objects of art. And they brought in specialists, and is it real, is it fake, is it fabricated? And you read that story in there, and they brought in a group of people and had them look at the art, and the 4 or 5 of them came out and they said, well, that's fake. And they said, well, what makes you say it's fake? What did you see? They couldn't explain what it was about that piece of art that they knew it was fake. It was their judgment born out of years and years and years of looking at that genre of sculpture that led them to believe it was fake. And after a lot of analysis, they found out it was fake. Your brain is capable of so many things. Listen to it. You don't have to make every decision completely, but if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not. So start asking questions. You know, when you guys built those dental offices, I'm sure there were days when you said, are we doing the right thing? And then something flashed and you said, yeah. You know? There was something. Sometimes the whole is greater than the parts. And your mind has a capacity for making judgments that we're not aware of all the time. So that's why I like that book, because it says, think differently about the world. Look at the world differently. Don't buy conventional wisdom when it comes to things and issues in the world. What is the backstory? What is going on behind the scenes that you don't know about? Trust your own brain, but study and enhance your capacity, and you'll get better at what you do. You know, it's the same thing with Freakonomics. You can get data, and there are ways to interpret data that will lead you to the wrong conclusion. So when you have data, it's one thing. The analysis of that data is something else. So yeah, I have a scientific background, but I also respect my brain. If it doesn't feel right, doesn't smell, I have what I call the mirror test. If I look in the mirror and I think there's something wrong, there's probably something wrong. If I can't look at my own, if I can't trust my own judgment, whose judgment am I going to trust? So that's why I like that book. I like to read obtuse. I like people that look at problems differently. You know, this was the issue. Read about Einstein. He looked at the world much differently than we did. Look at Hawkins over in Great Britain. This guy was supposed to be dead 50 years ago from multiple sclerosis. Look at that mind and how that mind works. He sees the universe in a way none of the rest of us do. And we need to listen to people like that. Trust your brain. It's a good thing.
Awesome. We have 10 minutes for questions. So right now I'm moving from technology to the audience. If you have any question, raise your hand.
Hello, Ed. Do you eat at McDonald's?
I haven't eaten at McDonald's for 3 days, but I'm going tomorrow. I eat at McDonald's every day of the week. I want to test you all. I'm going to put you to the test. Do you know what the Palm Hotel is? Have any of you ever had, I'm going to describe a food product to you. Beautiful English muffins, toasted perfectly, with a glorious poached egg on top, with some kind of meat, and a beautiful hollandaise sauce. Great product, right? You go to the finest restaurants, the finest hotels, they cost anywhere from 30 to 50, whatever the currency happens to be. It's one of the most expensive products you can buy in a restaurant, okay? Eggs cost 6 cents in the United States, and we sell them for $10, okay? You could go to the Peninsula Hotel in Chicago and get an Eggs Benedict and pay $35 plus tax with a cup of coffee. Now, you can go to McDonald's and get the exact same English muffin, because they use either Thomas's or Bay's English muffin, with the same 6-cent egg on it, cage-free, brown shell, all the rest of that stuff. And on top of that is a piece of Old English cheddar cheese and Canadian bacon. And pay $1. Pay $1. Now, I want to ask you a question. Other than the hollandaise sauce and the cheese, what's different about those two products? Why are you willing to pay $14 for a cup of Starbucks coffee and complain about gasoline in the United States at $4 a gallon, and then you're spending $80 a gallon for a cup of coffee? It's the most inane thing on the face of the earth. I eat at McDonald's every day because they got great food, all natural, as good as anything you're ever going to get, and I always get the same thing for breakfast because I love it, and I always get the largest hot tea I can get because I love tea. I don't like milk in it. I'm not British. I do like Splenda in it because I'm fat and diabetic, and I got to make sure I cut down on my sugar. But I eat at McDonald's every day, and I will to the day I die. It's just the way it is. I love the food. I know what's in that food. I had a person ask me a question yesterday, and I gave that person an intellectual answer, trying to be a good guy here in Kuwait. And the question was, what do you do with people that say, well, I never eat at McDonald's, it's dangerous, it's not good for you. What do you do? And I said, well, I don't do anything. Because they're not going to come to McDonald's no matter what I say. You're not going to be able to change their mind. You just won't. How many people in here think McDonald's food is not good for you? And be honest with me. You shouldn't eat it. How many people say you shouldn't eat it? Put your hands up. Come on, don't be embarrassed. You know? Okay, that's good. You know what? They're not McDonald's customers anyway. They're not going to go to McDonald's. But every day in the United States, 2,500 people go into a McDonald's restaurant and buy product. Every day of the year in the United States, 2,500 people go in there and buy something to eat. Somebody must like it. And you know what? Not one person's died yet. We worry about the wrong things in the world today. We've got real serious issues that we need to be worried about. Being worried about genetically modified food. You're worried about the wrong thing. God, or whoever you pray to, has been changing food for millions of years. Millions of years. It's done slowly because the bees pollinate this and pollinate that, and there's genetic mutation. It happens all the time. Just the way it is. mankind's figured out how to speed that process up. Is it the right thing to do? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not going to be around long enough to really know or understand that. But there were things going on in the 1800s that the people said were going to be horrible for the world. We're taller, we're smarter, we're more capable, we live better lives and better quality of lives than we ever have in the history of mankind. Do you know what the average age expectancy was for a human being back during the caveman era? How much? 37 years of age? What was the average age of people in the 1800s when they died in the United States? About 23. How do we know that the caveman lived to be 37? Were any of you there? Were there any scientists there to document that? Or is that hyperbole that's been developed of people that have an agenda? I don't know the answer. You just think about that. What are we doing? Who's next? Where'd he go?
I'm here. Hello. Hi.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I thought maybe
yeah.
you quit on me.
I have a question over here.
I thought maybe you didn't like my
That's the
answer
reason
about
I'm
McDonald's
stationed
food and I was
over
going to
here.
have to come and get you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank
I
you.
just wanted to ask from a PR perspective, how do you handle arguably one of the most controversial brands from a PR perspective?
Okay, most controversial.
From a PR perspective, how do you handle arguably one of the most controversial brands?
What would be the controversial issue?
There's a lot of
Any issue.
talk against McDonald's.
Any issue.
Yeah, just in general.
Okay, whenever there was any kind of a controversial issue, I had a crisis team. They were a standing team, and we tested them continually. We did trial runs to see how they performed. The one thing I learned going through all of that is tell the truth. When you got a problem, stand up before the news media and the world and say, we screwed up. We made a mistake. And here's what we did wrong, and here's what we should do right, and here's what we're going to do. You cannot, under any circumstance, mislead people because they're going to find out about it. And when they do, they will punish you. It's better to be truthful and honest and straightforward and say it like it is. You know, McDonald's has got a horrible problem going on in China right now where they had a labor dispute in a meat plant, and some of the employees, they were trying to organize a union in the plant, and so they did some things to the food they should have never done, and then they took photographs of it and put it on social media, you know, with smartphones and what have you, and it caused McDonald's to shut those plants down. It had a negative impact on Kentucky Fried Chicken as well. Grossly unfortunate that this happened. There's a lot more to it than what I'm telling you. The fact of the matter is, everybody in that plant should have been fired immediately. They should have shut the thing down, sourced the product from somewhere else, and repaired the damage that was done. You cannot buffalo your way through that nonsense. You cannot pretend like it didn't happen. You've got to be straightforward, honest, and direct. And confess. Tell the truth. Because when you start lying to the American public or the public generally across the world, you're going to get punished for it. It's painful to do, by the way. It's very painful to do.
Okay, take another question. I'm at the back. We're here. Ed.
Okay.
My name is Alma.
I got that part. I need
Yes,
to know what
I'm
your
dealing
question
my own restaurants as well. I'm used to go to McDonald's too. Actually, I have small questions. I face any problems in my work. I need to know what is the priority because I'm facing problem with my staff. Number one, what is the priority? To give training for my staff or to make a little bit changes in my menu or to do a little bit training or hire new staff as well. I'm facing this problem. Actually, most of my clients, they are a little bit old people. From 65 to 65% of my customers, they are a little bit old people. They are a little bit to go to my restaurants. I'm not have too much young people as well, maybe 35% or 40% from my customers.
I really do have a hearing problem, so with accents and my bad hearing, it's a problem.
Well, I'm doing my best as well.
Okay.
So she owns a restaurant.
I got that.
And she's facing problems with so many different things from staff mostly. And she's asking, what priority should I do in order to take my business to the next level? Should I train my staff or change the menu to take the business to the next level?
Without working in your restaurant and understanding what the dynamics are, my bias always will be start with your staff and make sure you understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, and try to understand what the needs of the consumer are and get those things married up. But without being there, it's hard for me to tell. People are complex, and they need to be led in certain ways. And what I try to do when I'm managing restaurants, and I did this when I was a store manager, I try to take every process in the restaurant, break it down to its most elemental level. And once I get it there, I try to create systems, processes, and procedures and checklists for people to follow so they don't get outside of what the parameters are. And in restaurants, unless you're highly skilled, the more complex the menu, the harder it is to run the restaurant, unless you have very specially trained people to do that. It's very, very difficult for me to run a fine dining restaurant because you have to charge so much money because there's so much waste at so many levels to get that level of service to a point where people crave the experience. I can't do it. I just don't have it in me. I need to run big systems and big processes because that's the way I trained myself to be. I suppose if I went to work in a fine dining restaurant, ultimately I could get to where I need to be. But my bias is always going to be, you got to start with your people. You got to make sure they're well trained and have a clear understanding of what your expectations are and how you want them to function and what you're going to hold them accountable for. And I think there needs to be expectations that you tell them, then you need to inspect those expectations, and then you need to have rewards and consequences. You need to tell your people, if they're successful, this is what I'm going to do for you, and if you fail, this is what the consequences are. And I think you really need to start with the people. It may very well be that your menu is so complex or so difficult that your people can't manage it, and that's something else to think about too. Maybe you're not set up properly from a people standpoint to deal with that menu. I hate menu proliferation. I've got a friend by the name of Joe Carlucci that runs an Italian restaurant, and he's a restaurant consultant. He's got the smallest menu that I've ever seen in my life. He's got like 10 things on that menu. And his attitude is, I want to do 10 dishes extremely well as opposed to 30 dishes in a mediocre way. So it's just a matter of your philosophy and what you want to do. But I would always start with the people, their training, and the leadership that you give them, and what your expectations are, and what the rewards and consequences are. And I understand in Kuwait it's very, very difficult to hire people. I was talking to the general manager of the restaurant here at the hotel, and they actually send recruiters to the Philippines and bring people back to work under a 2-year contract to make sure that this hotel is staffed properly. I've never experienced that before in my life because we've always had people in the United States or North America. Although recently we've got a lot of immigrants coming in from Mexico, and they're starting to take up a lot of the restaurant jobs, or have been for the last 10 years, actually. I hope I answered your question.
This is final question before we close.
Did John marry his Miami girlfriend?
Hi there.
Hi. Did John marry his girlfriend from Miami?
Yes.
Did he?
No.
Oh.
He's still looking for a girlfriend. Are you available? He's a very wealthy 30-year-old kid now. No, this is a true story. He literally asked her the question at the airport because she picked him up, and she said no, and he said okay, and he basically went back in the airport and got the next flight back to New York. Are we done?
Yep.
Okay, stop. I want to thank, no applause, because you're polite people. I want to thank you very much for inviting me to Kuwait. This is the first time I've been here, and it has been one of the best 3 days of my life. Barbara and I have gone around the community, met a lot of really, really wonderful people. I'm looking forward to come back to the region again. This is a very nice place to be with very, very hospitable people. You are the sweetest people I've ever met in my life collectively. So thank you very much. I want to give you a round of applause.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.